Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving deep into a totally fascinating classical Arabic treatise to uncover the hidden mechanics of something we literally do dozens of times a day, asking questions. We usually take the act of asking completely for granted, but classical grammarians and rhetoricians, they actually viewed it as a highly sophisticated art form.
What exactly are you doing when you ask a question? It seems like an incredibly simple premise, right? But let's just pause for a second and really think about this. When you formulate a query and direct it at someone else, are you merely looking for a piece of missing information? Or is there something much more powerful and maybe even a little manipulative happening right beneath the surface of that question mark?
To answer that, the source text begins by defining its core subject, al-Istifhaam, which translates essentially to interrogation. In its absolute purest, most literal sense, the author defines this as the act of requesting knowledge about something you don't already know. It's kind of like the linguistic equivalent of reaching out in the dark to grasp a hidden fact.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the art of asking, move into the interrogation toolkit, explore apprehension versus assent, step beyond the literal meaning, navigate the rhetorical spectrum, and wrap up with the true power of questions. Section 1. The art of asking. Let's jump into the structural foundation first so we can understand the raw materials of interrogation.
The original classical treatise on al-Istifhaam that we're decoding today lays out the underlying code behind how human beings extract information from one another. It's essentially this ancient, highly systematic manual for linguistic extraction. It meticulously breaks down every conceivable way a person can ask for data.
Section 2. The Interrogation Toolkit. Think of these linguistic particles as different types of keys, each designed to unlock a very specific type of door.
This primary toolkit maps out the precise words or particles used to target exact categories of the unknown. We're talking about things like ma for grasping the reality of a thing, man for identifying people, mata and aina for pinpointing time and space, kaifa for condition, kam for numbers, and aya for distinguishing between options. It's basically a perfectly organized filing system for reality.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The text introduces a highly specialized particle, ayana. Now, this doesn't just casually ask when something is going to happen. The author points out that ayana is used specifically to ask about a daunting, monumental future event. You absolutely wouldn't use it to ask when dinner is ready, right? It's strictly reserved for things like the day of resurrection. The intense emotion of dread is literally baked right into the grammar of the question itself.
Section 3. Apprehension versus assent. We're now entering the most technical and logical part of the text, dealing with how our brains actually process the answers we seek. The text draws a very strict logical divide in epistemology, which is just a fancy word for how we know what we know. It splits questioning into two distinct camps. The first is tasawwur, translating to apprehension or conceptualization. This is when you're trying to pinpoint a specific, singular entity from a lineup. The second is tasdiq, or assent, and this one is much simpler. It's when you're just trying to affirm if a relationship between two things exists at all. It's your basic, everyday yes or no question.
To achieve these two distinct logical goals, classical Arabic uses the foundational particle hamza, which acts as a total linguistic multi-tool. If you want to sour, to identify a specific thing, you use hamza alongside the word which means or. For example, is Ali traveling or Khalid? You're looking for a specific name there. But you can also strip away the or and use hamza purely for tasdiq. Is Ali traveling? Now you only want a yes or a no.
On a flip side, we have the particle hal, and this one is highly specialized. Unlike the multi-tool hamza, hal is strictly used for tasdiq. It firmly demands a yes or no affirmation. Because of this strict rule, the author notes it can never, ever be paired with the word or. You ask, did your friend come? Or even big philosophical questions like, does the phoenix exist? The only valid exits to this query are a direct affirmation or a negation. Section 4. Beyond the literal meaning. Okay, this is where the text takes a massive, totally fascinating turn away from basic grammar and logic. The author outlines 12 specific, distinct ways that a question can completely abandon its original literal meaning. Remember that definition of seeking unknown information we talked about earlier? Yeah, it gets thrown right out the window here. The text pivots straight into rhetorical mechanics. It explains that, depending entirely on the context of the situation, the speaker's intent, and the relationship between the people talking, questions transform. They go from being humble tools of discovery into incredibly powerful instruments of rhetorical force. Section 5. The rhetorical spectrum. Let's explore exactly how these grammatical tools are weaponized in everyday speech. In this first example of a rhetorical shift, known as nafi, or negation, the question isn't looking for an answer from you at all. When someone asks, "Is the reward for good anything but good?" they aren't waiting for you to say yes or no. It's actually a poetic, incredibly forceful way of making a definitive negative statement. The question really means, the reward for good is nothing but good. The question mark is literally just a disguise for a period.
We also see the concept of tahakkum, which is mockery. Imagine someone watching you make a terrible mistake and asking, "Does your intellect allow you to do this?" Let's be real, they aren't conducting a scientific inquiry into your cognitive capacities. Asking a question about someone's intellect in this context is a sharp, biting, sarcastic rebuke disguised as genuine curiosity.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that questions can be direct, unapologetic power plays. The text outlines how a question can secretly be an amr, a command. So will you not desist simply means stop it immediately. It can be a nahi, a prohibition. Do you fear them actually means you must not fear them. Or it can even be a wa'id, a thinly veiled threat. Did you do this when I have been so good to you? That is definitely not a request for data. That's an assertion of impending consequences.
Alternatively, questions can frame intense emotional reactions. The author lists ta'ajjub, pure astonishment, where the question is just a verbal gasp of surprise. Then there's tahqir, the act of belittling. Looking at someone and asking, "Is this the one you praised so much?" is designed entirely to diminish their worth. On the flip side, we have tashweek, using a question to entice and motivate. "Shall I guide you to a transaction that will save you?" The question creates this irresistible itch that the listener just desperately wants to scratch.
Perhaps the most profound example in the whole text is tanbi ala ad-dalal, which means alerting someone to their error. Even a simple where question, using that basic toolkit particle we saw earlier, can be totally transformed. Asking someone, "So where are you going?" in the right context isn't about their physical destination at all. It's a deep, philosophical tool used to stop someone in their tracks and alert them that they have completely lost their way in life.
Section 6. The power of questions. Let's tie all of this together and see what we can practically take away from this classical masterclass in human interrogation.
We've seen the full anatomy of asking today. We learned that questions begin their life as literal grammatical tools designed to gather unknown data. To use them properly requires strict logical framing. Our brains actually have to cleanly separate the pursuit of specific concepts from the pursuit of simple yes or no affirmations. But ultimately, context is absolutely everything. What starts as a simple request for data almost always evolves into a complex psychological operation, masking up to 12 distinct rhetorical motives.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder. The next time you open your mouth to interrogate the world around you, or the next time someone directs a query at you, are you really looking for an answer? Or are you, in fact, quietly trying to shape reality? Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning everything.